Hello there to my fellow internet citizens. I'm coming to you today with my review. A review after another week of our learning pods over at Mindful Education. And I think, a good thing, at least for me, to do as I go through some of these classes, give a little review of things that I've learned or things that I've relearned or things that have kind of settled on me a little more seriously as the time progresses. And we've had another week of mindful learning pods, and they're going well. Interesting stuff. I'm enjoying it. Usually for some of you who may be more familiar with me teaching, usually I teach an older age group than a lot of those that are showing attention or showing interest to the pod learning. Usually my age groups are the CXC and CAPE classes, 16, 17, 18-year-olds. But as I'm teaching more of the early primary pods of late, it's very interesting to me. To me, it goes back kind of to the beginning, to the start of something that, as for me and my journey through schooling and education, has always been a bit of a problem to me. Where did the problems start with this separation of having the natural curiosity that to me every child, every human has, and when does that separate from schoolwork? That the schoolwork, that learning, that education seems like it's no longer interesting as you go through schooling. And starting at that early primary age group, you're getting a chance, well, at least I'm getting a chance to see how and why a lot of these things are starting. So before I get further into some of these observations and studies that have been done to show this, I'm not just going to be talking out of the blue here. I'm talking about some of the interesting studies that have been done on children and on different aspects of learning. Be sure, if you are interested in this, and as I've said before, we have early primary, late primary, early secondary, and late secondary age groups available. If you are so interested in this, head over to Mindful Education, mindful_education, mindful with two L's, as is common now. Mindful with two L's education over on Instagram, and be sure to follow us there. Get into contact with us there if you are interested in getting someone you know or getting yourself into one of these pods. Now, something interesting that I've seen and that I think may be a bit of a problematic area is the idea of asking questions, finding out things, asking questions. And I've noticed there's a student in one of my classes. I've known him for some time, going through the process of progressing through education and learning. And he changed schools. He changed primary schools. And you could have seen the difference when he was in one primary school where he was struggling a bit, and you could have seen the difference when he entered another primary school, and you could see the difference now that he is inside of the pod doing more. One of the main differences to me is the fear of asking questions, the fear of being wrong. And to me, if you're a parent and you're looking at your child and you're wondering, how could you tell how your child is doing in a school? I think that's one of the primary things to check. How is your child doing on questioning? Is your child still asking a lot of questions, boldly asking those questions, asking the unique questions? Are they willing to be wrong? And something you notice with children a lot is that children ask some of the strangest questions. The way how their mind works. There was some questions, and I regret not being able to record some more this week going through, but some of the questions and answers you get from children when they don't have the curiosity pulled out of them quite yet, some of those answers and questions are very interesting because their mind still thinks kind of outside the box. There isn't really a box quite formed for the children yet. So is your child still willing to ask questions? Is your child still willing to be wrong, willing to look silly in the questions they're asking? Or have they become very conscious of the questions they're asking and afraid now to ask these questions? And that's something you notice, I've noticed, happens to many children when they enter that primary school age group, when they reach that 5-year-old age group, and they're entering that whole massive school system, and all of a sudden those interesting, curious questions kind of just dry up. And that is a problem. Let's jump over to an article I was reading recently. The importance of kids asking questions, an article from Inform Ed, it's an educational website. Why do kids ask so many questions? According to a recent Independent UK article, curious children ask an average of 73 questions per day. Half of those questions many parents struggle to answer, yada, 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 yada. As children grow up, it's natural to be curious about the world around them, said child psychologist Sam Wass, who was interviewed for the Independent piece. As parents, it's easy to forget just how much of our children's knowledge comes from what we tell them. And that's exactly it also. It's important to remember that children enter the world basically knowing nothing, just about nothing. They have some instinctual things, but a lot of the important things in being a good human, being a good adult human, are things that have to be learned during the process of time. Questions are very important. Researchers at the University of Belgrade found that there are 3 types of questions most children ask: cognitive, social, and operational questions. Cognitive questions, which children ask to get new information and satisfy their curiosity, can be classified as questions about oneself and others, questions about the world around us, and questions about various activities. That's cognitive questions. Social questions arise from children's needs, which only interpersonal contact and interaction can satisfy. Their purpose is interaction, and they are classified as questions, the purpose of which is to draw attention and make contact. Validation questions, questions requiring confirmation, questions expressing disagreement, and questions referring to playing games. So to have that social aspect of their life, that's those questions. So we have cognitive questions, then we have social questions, and thirdly, we have operational questions. These have been classified as either requests for help or requests for permission, while their basic function is to provide a child with the necessary conditions for their activities. Our classification shows that children ask questions for at least 3 essentially different reasons: to get information about something, to make contact with adults for the sake of interaction itself and for what it offers, for example, confirmation, consolation, or attention, and to get the necessary permission or to help be able to act in accordance with their needs and wishes. So 3 different kinds of questions that children ask there. Children are clever and quickly learn who to turn to for answers. A 2012 study found that age and the ease of distinguishing between reliable and unreliable sources influence children's ability to effectively question those sources to solve problems. For the study, children aged 3 to 5 years old were introduced to a knowledgeable informant contrasted with an informant who always gave inaccurate answers or one who always indicated ignorance. Children were generally better at determining which informant to question when a knowledgeable informant was contrasted with an ignorant informant than when a knowledgeable informant was contrasted with an inaccurate informant. So, what they're saying through all of this, a study was done. Several studies were done. There are many studies done on children and early childhood. And what they noted in the study was 3 different types of questions. The children asked cognitive questions. These are questions trying to figure out the things around them. These are very important questions when it comes to a child building intelligence, as it were. Then there are the social side of questions, and then there are the operational side. So can I go to the toilet and that kind of thing. Different types of questions. And also, very importantly, children are able to decipher who gives them the best answers very quickly. As children age, that was something noted in that study too. As children get older, they are quickly able to decipher and figure out who is able to answer these questions, who is not able to answer these questions. And the problem is, if a child ends up in an environment, in a schooling environment where they recognize the teachers are not able to or are not interested in, or they just don't have the time to sufficiently answer my questions, then what you're going to notice happening is the questions are going to dry up. The children aren't foolish. They are able to understand, okay, this question cannot be answered here, so let's not ask the question. And the questions themselves are very important. an article here, how to deal with gifted kids that ask many questions. Parents of gifted children know that these kids love asking loads of questions. They are incredibly curious and can't seem to get enough information. One of their favorite questions to ask may very well be why. And this article goes through describing gifted children, children that are particularly intelligent. And one of the ways you recognize that is their tendency to ask more questions. Now, I don't disagree. I don't disagree with the idea that all children aren't at the same level in terms of performance in academics, in schoolwork, in learning. I don't agree with that. But I tend to lean towards the side where I think the vast majority of children are or can be gifted, at least in some areas. Now, something that they point out about being gifted and a trait in being gifted. What is intellectual overexcitability? The intellectual overexcitability is characterized by an intense and accelerated mental activity. That does not mean, however, that it is concerned with academic achievement. Instead, it is concerned with a love of truth and a quest for understanding. Gifted children with this overexcitability may not be high achievers in school, but they are still deeply curious and interested in learning. Now, when I read something like this, intellectual overexcitability, now for sure, I think that's something I may have had, may still have, but I wonder if it's something nearly every child has. When you speak to a child before the drudgery of school days wears out all of that curiosity, nearly every child in some area or the other has that overexcitability when it comes to learning, when it comes to intellect. I teach. And when you're teaching a child and the child is understanding or they're able to understand something, very often you see they get an excitement as regards to that learning. And this excitement is seen in some as a trait of being gifted. So maybe it might be possible that as a parent or as a teacher, as a guardian, as someone looking over children, if you are able to influence and encourage the excitability around intellect, around learning, maybe you could influence them in their intelligence also. A study out of, I think this was a Czech study, the focus, this is just the abstract, the summary of this study. The focus of this paper is the ability of children to ask questions. Originally a natural manifestation of children's inquisitiveness, this paper focuses on how this ability can be grown and developed at school. It was verified in this study, it was verified that the ability of children to ask questions varies consistently, regardless of stimulus type. The ability to ask questions was correlated with IQ. Children with higher intelligence ask usually more questions with both visual and linguistic stimuli. So in other words, if you show a child some new stimulus, something new, something unique, something to invigorate their imagination or their mind, more intelligent children ask more questions. And I am wondering here, just as I was saying before, if it's possible to do this in reverse. Yes, more intelligent children will ask more questions. Does that mean or suggest, or might it be possible that if we could encourage more children to continue asking the more questions, that it may encourage those children to be more intelligent? Now, many people argue about how possible it is to raise someone's intelligence, or I don't even think that's relevant in this case, because if it is that the more intelligent you are, the more questions you ask, I would suggest that if you get a child, if you get a person to ask the most questions that is practicably possible, even if they may not become the most intelligent person on earth, it would actually set them up to be the most intelligent possibility for their own genetics, for their own reality, for their own biology. You are set up to be the most intelligent person that you could be. I would say questions could lead down that road. And as an addition to that previous study, the same scientists who did that previous study, they did another paper. And I found this paper very interesting in pointing pretty directly at what I'm talking about here. School institution where children learn the answers without asking questions? Listen to this abstract. The paper deals with the topics of questions and questioning as important components of information behavior. It describes the basic starting points. The ability to ask questions is innate to man, appearing already in the 18th month. Asking questions is associated with other mental functions, especially with thought processes. So as early as 18 months, children are able to do that. Now, they analyzed their schooling and that's in the Czech Republic, I believe. They found that in terms of questioning, it is proven unsatisfactory. 80% of the questions are asked by teachers. The majority of the questions asked by the teacher have the character of supplemental questions and questions only activating the memory. So it's just a question to, do you remember this? You remember when I told you last week that 2 2s are 4, so I'm going to come this week and ask you what are 2 2s, and you'd say 4. It's just a matter of memory. It's not activating anything else in the mind. In the classroom, 3 to 4 students on average pose questions, boys slightly more than girls, and usually just one question. 75% of students in this regard are the silent majority and do not ask at all. They were going in a little further into Czech education there. Now, this isn't Trinidad and Tobago, this isn't Caribbean education, this isn't even here in the Western world. But I wonder if our education is any better than that. I wonder if we analyze our education system, how many of the questions being asked are being asked from the teacher to the students, and there aren't any questions being formed from the students back to the teacher. And as we checked here, many studies have been done. The amount of questions asked is correlated with intelligence. So maybe as I said, we could wonder if encouraging a child to ask more questions, maybe it might not make them more intelligent than Einstein, but it may make them the most intelligent that they could be, encouraging those questions. And we see so often, as I was saying, the thing that I've noted in watching education is you see so often children, from the moment they reach into primary school, from the moment they reach into that bigger school system, the number and the uniqueness of questions they ask all of a sudden dies down, while that's kind of the very thing that is important in bringing their intelligence to the fore. The study that was done, they found most of the questions asked by teachers were just questions about memory. And that doesn't awaken anything deeper in the mind. And that's what you want in education. You want someone's mind to be so awakened, so open, that learning becomes much easier. And I think questions are the very base of this. Questions are at the foundation of it. So a checklist for you to look at if your child is in school, you're wondering, how are they doing in school? One of the most important things, are they asking questions? What kind of questions are they asking? And I think one of the most important things when you're looking at questions is the fear of being wrong. Is your child afraid to be wrong? Because if your child is afraid to be wrong, then they're afraid to ask questions. Questions have the tendency to show how you're thinking, to show where your thought process is at. So some children are very afraid of asking questions for that reason. And it's so strange. In teaching, you'd see sometimes a child would be more willing to fake the entire thing, which is more obvious that they don't know, to both the teacher and to the rest of the class. They're more willing to fake it and embarrass themselves in faking it than to ask a question and show that legitimately they don't understand something yet. And failing to understand that the question itself is the basis of intelligence. So the child who asks the most questions isn't the least intelligent child. That is actually very likely the child headed for success, the child headed for the top of the class, the child headed for the top of performance. So tell me, what do you think? Do you think that in our education system, the style of questions, the encouragement of children to ask questions, to be questioning, to be curious, is being encouraged as much as it should, or is it being destroyed? And the sad thing with this is that curiosity is natural. Children are born with that curiosity. From the age of 18 months, questions are already starting to form in children's minds. So If a child reaches a stage where they stop asking questions, then it's not that they never had it, but they lost it. And why are they losing it? Answer that question for me in the comments if you are so interested. If you stayed this long, please do hit that like button. It does help. Drop a comment if you have something to say. If you are looking at this video and are not yet subscribed, do hit that subscribe button. We have more videos coming, so please do stay tuned, and I'll see you in the next video.